A good afternoon to all of you. It's been a while since I've streamed, and as you know, my stream schedule is very tight, and I always keep up with it um, because I have so many loyal viewers. So that's why I make sure that my videos arrive on time. Um, as promised in the previous stream, today we will be reading the Fortnite book, or also known as Battle Royale by Koushun Takami. I have not read this book. I look forward to it, seeing as it is the father of all Battle Royale genres. Um, so yeah, let's get into it. Um, I don't know how long the chapters are, or how long it will take me to get through one of the chapters. So I don't know how long this first episode will be. I also don't know if my voice will be able to keep up because I do have a cold coming on, but we'll see. What? Battle Royale? What's Battle Royale? Come on. Don't tell me you don't know that. Why bother coming to a pro wrestling match, huh? The name of a move? The name of a tournament? No, Battle Royale is a pro wrestling match. What? Today? Today, here, you mean? No, it's not today's program. It's only held in large arenas for big events. Look, there's Takako Inoue. Oh no, sorry. That's right, Battle Royale. It's still held in the All Japan Pro Wrestling League. In a nutshell, let's see. Battle Royale is. You know how your usual pro wrestling match is one on one or between paired up partners? Well, with Battle Royale, 10 or 20 wrestlers all jump into the ring, and then you're free to attack anyone. One on one or 10 against 1. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many wrestlers pin someone down. What you don't even know what a pin is? Once your back's on the mat, the count goes 1, 2, 3, you lose. It's no different from a normal match. Players can also forfeit, and occasionally someone will get knocked out. Oh, yeah, and there's the count out. You can also be disqualified by breaking the rules. Most wrestlers lose by falls in the battle royale. Hey, go Takako, go! Go, go! Oh, sorry. In any case, the ones who fall lose. They have to leave the ring. Fewer and fewer players remain in the game. There's only 2 left in the end. One on one. A very serious match. One out of those 2 will eventually take a fall. Then there's only 1 player left in the ring. And he's the winner. He wins. He's given a huge trophy and prize money. Get it? Huh? What about players who've been friends? Well, at first, of course, they help each other out, but in the end, they have to fight each other. You have to follow the rules. Which also means you get to watch some rare matches. Like way back when the tag team partners of Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith were the remaining players. Same thing happened with tag team partners Animal Warrior and Hawk Warrior. In that match, though, I don't remember which one, but the guy intentionally went for a countout, letting his partner win. A display of camaraderie, which was kind of a letdown. Oh, you can also team up with players who used to be your friend, used to be your enemies. But the moment you think you're teaming up to get rid of someone else, this sneaky friend can suddenly betray and beat you. Let's see. A battle royale I'd like to see now. Well, given how many federations there are, I'd like to see a battle royale between the leaders of each federation. Kai Muto, Shinjaya Hashimoto, Mitsuharu Misawa, Toshikaki Kawada, Nobuhiko Takada, Masakatsu Funaki, Akira Maeda, Great Sasuke, Hayabusa, Genji Takano, also Genshiro Tenryu, Riki Koshu, Tatsumi Fuyinami, and Kengo Kimura. could still be in the running. It'd be fun to add Yoji Anjo and Super Delphin. They might actually end up being the last two remaining players. For women's, first of all, Takako, then Aya Kong, Manami Toyota, Kyoko Inoue, Yumiko Hotta, Akira Hokuta, Bon Nakano, of course Dynamite Kansai, and Kyuti Suzuki, and Hikari Fukuoka, Mayumi Osaki, yeah, yada yada yada. And what? How could you not know any of them? Did you really come here to watch pro wrestling? Oh no 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 no! Takako, fight back! Takako! Alright. Do have one note before we continue. Pro wrestling is fake and also gay. I really don't understand why you would watch a piece of play acting between muscled men or muscled women and actually be invested in the fight, like the outcome isn't already decided before the match even starts. And also all the fighting is fake. Like MMA is actually dangerous. People get knocked out, there's blood. Usually there's blood on one of the players. But pro wrestling is just play fighting. I don't know why you would ever be interested in it, or why would I even be invested in the stakes. But luckily, this book isn't about pro wrestling, so I'm sorry about that. I just choked on my own tea. Let me take another sip to wash it away. Prologue. Government Internal Memo 1997. Number 00387461. Top secret. Dispatched by Central Authority Secretariat, Special Task Force Defense Supervisor and Battle Experiment Advisor of the Special Defense Army. 2. Supervisor in charge of Number 12. 1997 Battle Experiment Number 68 Program, May 20, 18015. We have confirmed evidence of an intrusion into the Central Government Operations System. The intrusion was undetected on the date of its occurrence, March 12. We are currently investigating any additional evidence of re-entry. The suspect's possible identity, purpose, and any possible information leaks are also being investigated. But because the suspect's computer skills were highly advanced, we anticipate a significant delay in producing the suspect's profile. The Central Authority Secretariat, Special Task Force, Defense Supervisor, and the Battle Experiment Division of the Special Defense Army were informed that the data from program number 68 may have been corrupted, and as a result we immediately considered the postponement of program number 12 for 1997. However, because preparations for number 12 are complete, and because there is no indication that the above data has been leaked into the civilian population, we have concluded the program should proceed as scheduled. However, we will be considering rescheduling future programs following number 12, as well as implementing design changes in Guadalcanal. As the supervisor in charge of executing the experiment, you, supervisor of program number 12, are to proceed with extreme caution. Furthermore, this infiltration incident is classified top secret information and is to be treated as such. Part 1. Start game. 42 students remaining. As the bus entered the prefectural capital of Takamatsu, garden suburbs transformed into city streets of multicolored neon, headlights of oncoming cars and checkered lights of office buildings, a group of well-dressed men and women stood talking to each other in front of street-side restaurants while they waited for a taxi. Tired, squatting youths smoked in the clean parking lot of a convenience store. A worker on his bicycle waited for the light to change at the crossing. It was chilly for a May evening, so the man had put on his worn-out jacket. Along with these other drifting impressions, the worker disappeared behind the bus window, swallowed by the low engine rumble. The digital display above the bus driver's head changed to 8 o'clock, 8:47. Shuya Nanahara, male student number 15, third year class B, Shiroyawa Junior High School, Shiroyawa Town, Kagawa Prefecture, had been staring outside, leaning over Yoshitiko's Kuninobu, male student number 7, who had the window seat. As Yoshitoku ducked through his bag, Shuya stared at his own right foot, which was sticking out in the aisle, and stretched out his cat's sneakers with his toes. It used to be that cats weren't hard to find, but now they were extremely rare. The canvas of Shuya's shoes were worn on the right heel, and the stray threads stuck out like cat's whiskers. The shoe company was American, but the shoes themselves were made in Colombia. At present, 1997, the Republic of Greater East Asia hardly suffered from a shortage of food. In fact, it was rich with commodities, but imports were hard to come by lately. Well, it was only to be expected in a country with an official policy of isolationism. Besides, America, most of the government textbook called them the America imperialists, was an enemy state. From the back of the bus, Shuya watched his 41 classmates who were illuminated by dull fluorescent lights, fixed in dingy ceiling panels. They were all in the same class from last year. I really gotta take another sip, I'm sorry. They were all still excited and chatting away, since hardly an hour had passed since their departure from their hometown of Shiroiwa. Spending the first night of a study trip on a bus seemed a little cheap. Worse yet, it felt like they were going on a forced march. But everyone would calm down once the bus crossed the Seto Bridge and got on the Sanyo Highway and headed towards their destination, the island of Kyushu. The loud students at the front who were sitting around their teacher, Mr. Hayashida, were girls. Yuki Utsumi, female student number 2, the class representative who looked good with braided hair. Haruka Tanizawa, female student number 12, her volleyball teammate, was exceptionally tall. Izumi Kanai, female student number 5, the preppy whose father was a town representative. Satomi Noda, female student number 17, the model student who wore wire-rimmed glasses which suited her calm, intelligent face. And Chisato Matsui, female student number 19, who was always quiet and withdrawn. They were the mainstream girls. You could call them the neutrals. Girls tended to form cliques, but there weren't any particular groups that stuck out in Shiroyawa's junior high school's third year class B, so categorizing them didn't seem right. If there was a group, it was the rebel, or to put it more bluntly, the delinquent group, led by Mitsuko Soma, female student number 11, Hirono Shimizu, female student number 10, and Yoshimi Yahagi, female student number 21, rounded out that bunch. Shuya couldn't see them from where he was sitting. The seats right behind the driver were slightly raised, and popping up above them were the two heads of Kazuki Hiko Yamamoto, male student number 21, and Sakura Ogawa, female student number 4, the most intimate couple in the class. Maybe they were laughing because their heads shook slightly. They were so insular. The most trivial thing could have been entertaining them. Closer to Shuya, lying in the aisle, was a large school uniform. It belonged to Yoshio Akamatsu, male student number 1. He was the biggest kid in the class, but he was the timid type. The kind of kid who would always end up the target of pranks and insults. His big body was crouched over and he was busy playing a handheld video game. Also in the aisle were the jocks Tatsumuchi Oki, male student number 3, handball team, Kashui Nida, male student number 16, soccer team, and Tadakatsu Hatagami, male student number 18. They were all sitting together. Shuya himself had played Little League baseball in elementary school and was known as a star shortstop. Actually, he'd been friends with Tadakatsu, but they had stopped hanging out. Partly this was because Shuya had stopped playing baseball, but it's also had to do with the fact that Shuya had started playing electric guitar, which was considered an unpatriotic activity. Tadakatsu's mother was uptight about that sort of thing. Yes, rock was outlawed in this country. Of course, there were loopholes. Shuya's electric guitar came with a government approved sticker which read, "Decadent music is strictly prohibited." Decadent music was rock. Come to think of it, Shuya thought, I've changed my friends too. He heard someone laugh quietly behind Big Yoshio Akamatsu. It was one of Shuya's new friends, Shinji Mimura. Shinji had short hair and wore an intricate designed ring on his left ear. By the time Shuya and Shinji became classmates in their second year, Shuya had already heard of him. Shinji was known as the third man, the team's first string shooting guard. His athletic skill was equal to Shuya's, though Shinji would have said, "I'm better, bro." Together on the basketball court for the first time in their second year class competition, they'd made for a deadly combo, so it was only natural they hit it off. There was a lot more to Shinji than sports, though. His grades in subjects other than math and English weren't great, but his breadth of real-world knowledge was incredible, and his views were mature, way beyond his peers. He somehow had an answer for any question about overseas information that couldn't be obtained in this country. And he always knew the best thing to say when you were down, like, "You know it, I'm the man." But he was never arrogant. Instead, he'd smile and crack a joke. He was never full of himself. Basically, Shinji Mimura was a good guy. Shinji appeared to be sitting next to his buddy from grade school, Yutaka Sato, male student number 12, the class clown. Yutaka must have cracked another joke because Shinji was laughing. Hiroki Sugimura, male student number 11, sat behind them. His tall, lanky body barely fit into the narrow seat. He was reading a paperback book. Hiroki was reserved and studied martial arts, so he projected toughness. He didn't hang out with the other guys much, but once you got to know him a little, he turned out to be nice. He was just shy. Shuya got along with him. Was he reading the book of Chinese poetry he liked so much? Chinese books in translation were fairly easy to obtain. Not surprising, considering the Republic claimed China as part of her homeland. Shuya once came across a line in an American paperback novel he dug out from a used bookstore. He managed to get through it with a dictionary. Friends come and then they go. Maybe that's how things were. Just as he and Tadakatsu were no longer friends, there might come a time when he wasn't friends with Shinji and Hiroki anymore. Well, maybe not. Shuya glanced at Yoshikito Kuninobu, who was still digging through his bag. I gotta take another sip. Shuya had made it this far with Yoshikito Kuninobu, and that would never change. After all, they were friends ever since they wet their beds at the Catholic institution with the bombastic name, the Charity House, where orphans or other kids who, due to circumstances, were no longer able to be with their parents, you could say they were almost cursed to be friends. Maybe we should cover religion while we're at it. In fact, this country, under a unique system of national socialism, ruled over by an executive authority named the dictator, Shinji Mimura once said with a grimace, "This is what they call successful fascism. Where else in the world could you find something so sinister? Had no national religion. The closest thing to religion was faith in the political system. But this wasn't paired up with any established religion. Religious practice therefore was permitted as long as it remained moderate and at the same time wasn't guaranteed. So it was only practiced in private by dedicated followers. Shuya himself never really had any religious inclinations, but it was thanks to this particular religious institution that he managed to grow up relatively unscathed and normal. He thought he should appreciate it that much, There were state orphanages, but apparently their accommodations and programs were poorly run, and from what he heard, they served as training schools for Special Defense Force soldiers. Shuya turned around and looked back. The group of delinquents that included Ryo Ishigagawa, male student number 10, and Mitsuru Numai, male student number 17, was sitting on the white seat at the back of the bus. There was. Shuya couldn't see his face, but he could see between the seats the head with the oddly styled, slicked backed, long hair poking out by the right window, though on its left side, well, it seemed Ryoya Sasagawa had left two seats open in between. The others were talking and laughing over something dirty. The head remained absolutely still. Perhaps he'd fallen asleep, or maybe like Shuya, he was watching the city lights. Shuya was completely baffled by the fact that this boy, Kazuo Kiriyama, male student number 6, would actually participate in a childish activity like a study trip. Kiriyama was the leader of the Fox in their district, a group that included Ryoye and Mutsuru. Kiriyama was by no means big. At best, he was the same height as Shuya, but he could easily pin down high school students and even take on local yakuza. His reputation was legendary throughout the entire prefecture, and his father being the president of a leading corporation didn't hurt. There were rumors, though, that he was an illegitimate child. Shuya wasn't interested, so he never bothered to find out. Of course, that wouldn't have been enough. He had a handsome, intelligent face, and his voice wasn't particularly low, but there was something intimidating about him. He was the top student in Class B, and the only one who barely kept up with him was Kiyoshi Motobuchi, male student number 20, who studied so hard he didn't get much sleep. In sports, Kazuo was better and more graceful than almost anyone else in the class. The only ones at Shiroyoa Junior High who could compete with him seriously were Yes, the former star shortstop Shuya, and the current star shooting guard Shinji Mimura. So in every respect, Kazuo Kiriyama was perfect. But then, how could someone this perfect end up a leader of thugs? That was really none of Shuya's business. But if there was one thing Shuya could tell, it was a sense, almost tactile, that Kazuo was different. Shuya couldn't say exactly how. Kazuo never did anything bad in school. He'd never bully around someone like Yoshoi Akamatsu, the way Ryuhei Sasagawa did. But there was something so remote about him. Was that it? At least that's how it felt. He was absent a lot. The idea of Kazuo studying was completely absurd. In every class, Kiriyama remained quietly seated at his desk as if he were thinking of something that had nothing to do with class, Shuya thought. If the government didn't have the power to enforce compulsory education on us, he probably wouldn't come to school at all. On the other hand, he might just show up on a whim. I don't know in any case, Shuya thought. I expected Kazuo to stop something as trivial. I expected Kazuo to skip something as trivial as a study trip. But then he promptly shows up. Was this on a whim too? Shuya. Shuya was staring at the ceiling panel lights, wondering about Kiriyama when a perky voice interrupted his thoughts. From the seat across the aisle, Nororiko Nakagawa, female student number 15, offered something wrapped in crisp cellophane. The bag sparkled like water under the white lights, and it was filled with light brown discs. Cookies, probably. On top was a bow tied with a gold ribbon. Noriko Nakagawa was another girl who was neutral like Yuki's Utsumi's group. Other than her kind eyes, which were noticeably dark, she had a round, girlish face and shoulder-length hair. She was petite and playful. In short, she was an average girl. If there was something particular about her, it was probably the fact that she wrote the best compositions in literature class. This was how Shuya got to know Noriko Shuya, who'd spent break periods writing lyrics for his songs in the margins of his notebooks, and Noriko would insist on reading them. She usually hung with Yuki's group, but because she'd showed up late today, she had no other choice but to take an open seat. Shuya half extended his hand and raised his brow. For some reason, Noriko became flustered and said, "They're leftovers from the ones my brother begged me to bake. They're best fresh, so I brought them for you. And Mr. Nobu." Mr. Nobu was Yoshikito's Kuninobu's nickname. Although he had bulging, friendly eyes, the nickname seemed appropriate for someone who could be, oddly enough, mature and wise. None of the girls called him by that name, but Noriko had no problem calling the boys by their nicknames, and the fact that this hardly offended any of them indicated how uniquely disarming she was. Shuya had a sport-related nickname, the same name as a famous cigarette brand. But in the same way that Shinji was referred to as the third man, no one called him by this to his face. He'd already noticed this before, Shuya observed, but she's the only girl who calls me by my first name. Yoshitoku, who'd been listening in on them, interrupted. Really? For us? Thanks so much, if you made them. I bet they're delicious. Yoshitoku snatched the bag from Shuya's hand, quickly untied the ribbon and took out a cookie. Wow, these are awesome. As Yoshikito praised Noriko, Shuya grinned. Could he be more obvious? The moment Noriko sat next to Shuya, he'd been repeatedly glancing over at her, sitting upright, completely nervous. It was a month and a half during spring vacation. Shuya and Yoshikito had gone fishing for black bass at the dam reservoir that provided the city its water supply. Yoshitoku confessed to Shuya, Hey, Shuya, I got a crush on someone. Huh? Who is it? Nakagawa. You mean from our class? Yeah. Which one? There are two Nakagawas. Yuka Nakagawa? Hey, unlike you, I'm not into fat girls. What the... So you're saying Kazumi is fat? She's just a little plump. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, it's Noriko. Huh? Well, she's nice. Isn't she though? Isn't she? Alright. Yes, Yoshikito was totally obvious. But in spite of his behavior, Noriko seemed oblivious to Yoshikito's feelings for her. Maybe she was slow with stuff, like this or something. It wasn't surprising given her personality. Shuya took a cookie from the bag still in Yoshikito's hand, and examined it. Then he looked over at Noriko. So they lose their flavor? Uh-huh, she nodded, her eyes strained oddly. That's right. Which means you're sure they taste pretty good. He might have learned this form of sarcasm from Shinji Mimura. Shuya often used it lately, to the dismay of other classmates. But Noriko just emitted a happy laugh and said, I guess so. Come on, Yoshitiko interrupted again. I told you they were good, didn't I, Noriko? Noriko smiled. Thanks, you're so nice. Yoshitiko all of a sudden froze up, as if he jammed his finger into an electrical outlet, and turned mute. Staring silently into his lap, he proceeded to devour his cookie. Shuya grinned and ate the rest of his cookie. The warm, sweet taste and smell spread through his mouth. Those are good. These are good, Shuya said. Noriko, who had been observing him all this time, exclaimed, Thank you. He could be wrong, but somehow the tone of her voice was different than when she thanked Yoshitiko. Well, wait, true, she was staring at him while he was eating the cookie. Were they really leftovers from a batch she baked for her brother? Maybe she'd baked them for someone else. Or maybe he was just plain wrong. Then for some reason Shuya thought of Kazumi. She was a year ahead, and a fellow music club member until last year. In the Republic of Greater East Asia, rock music was strictly prohibited in school club activities. But when their advisor, Miss Miyata, was absent, music club members could play rock on their own. That was the kind of membership the club attracted in the first place anyway. Kazumi Shintani was the best female saxophone player. When it came to rock saxophone, though, she was the best in the entire club. She was tall, almost the same height as Shuya, who stood 170 centimeters, and plump, but with a remarkably mature face and her hair bundled by her shoulders, she looked awesome with her alto saxophone. Shuya was thrilled by the sight. Then she taught Shuya how to play different guitar chords. She said, I played a little before I started playing the saxophone. From that point on, Shuya spent every spare minute he had practicing his guitar, and by his second year, he was the best player in the club. It was all because he wanted Kazumi to hear him play. Then one day, when the two of them happened to be alone in the music room after school, Shuya played and sang a version of Summertime Blues, which impressed her. That was so great, Shuya. That was so awesome. That day, Shuya bought a can of beer for the first time in his life and celebrated with a private toast. It tasted great, but 3 days later, when he asked her out, confessing, I really like you, she responded, I'm sorry, I'm already going out with someone. She graduated and went to a high school with a music department, along with her boyfriend, which reminded Shuya of his conversation with Yoshitiko at the dam over spring break. After sharing his feelings for Noriko, Yoshitiko asked him, Are you still hung up on Kazumi? Shuya answered, Yeah, I think I'll be hung up over her for the rest of my life. Yoshitoki looked stumped. But she has a boyfriend, right? Throwing the silver lure with all his might as if throwing a ball in from the outfield. He answered, That doesn't matter. Shuya took the bag of cookies from Yoshitiko, who was still staring down into his lap. Aren't you going to leave some for Naroki? Oh, yeah, sorry. Shuya returned the bag to Naroki. Sorry about that. That's alright. I don't mind. You guys should take them all. Really? But we shouldn't be the only ones. Shuya took his first glance at the guy sitting next to Noriko, wrapped in his school uniform. Shogo Kawada, male student number 5, leaned against the window with his arms crossed and his eyes closed. He might have been asleep. His hair was cropped so short he looked like a monk. His slightly stubbled face reminded Shuya of a punk racketeer at a carnival. Wow, facial hair, everyone. Doesn't he look kind of old for a junior high school student? Or there was only one thing he knew. Although Class B consisted of the same students as it did last year, Shogo Kawada had transferred last April from Kobe, and due to some circumstance, an injury or illness, he didn't like the bedridden type, so it must have been an injury, Kawada had to stay behind a year, because he was unable to attend school for over 6 months. In other words, he was 1 year older than Shuya and his classmates. Shuya himself never told anyone this, but that was what Shuya had heard. In fact, he hadn't heard good things about Shogo. There was a rumor that he'd been a notorious thug at his last school and that his hospitalization was a result of a fight. To support this rumor, his body was covered with scars. A long scar from what appeared to be a knife wound ran over his left brow. And when they changed in the gym lockers, this was besides the point, but Kawada's body was built like a middleweight boxer's, Shuya was shocked to find the same kind of scars covering his arms and back. There were 2 round scars next to each other on his left shoulder. They looked like gunshot wounds, but that was unbelievable. Every time he heard these rumors about Shogo, someone would inevitably suggest, he's probably going to end up fighting Kazuo. Right after Shogo transferred to their school, that fool Ryuei Sasagawa tried to intimidate Shogo. The exact details of what followed were only hearsay, but apparently Ryuei turned pale, retreated, and went crying for help from Kazuo. Kazuo looked indifferent though, and only glanced at Ryuei. He didn't even say a word to Shogo, so at least for the time being they'd managed to avoid a confrontation. Kazuo didn't seem interested in Shogo. Shogo didn't seem interested in Kazuo. As a result, Class B remained peaceful. They lucked out. Everyone avoided Shogo because of his age difference and the rumors. But Shuya didn't like judging people on rumors. Someone once said, if you could see for yourself that then there'd be no need to lend an ear to what others said. Shuya pointed his chin past Naroki toward Shogo. I wonder if he's sleeping. She glanced over at Shogo. I didn't want to wake him up. He doesn't look like the type who's into cookies anyway. Naroki chuckled, and as Shuya was about to, they heard, no thanks. Shuya glanced back at Shogo. A strong, low voice echoed in his head. Although Shuya wasn't familiar with the voice, it obviously came from Shogo, who still kept his eyes closed, though he didn't seem asleep. Shuya all of a sudden realized he'd rarely ever heard Shogo's voice, even though Shogo had transferred to the school over a month ago. Noriko glanced at Shogo and then looked at Shuya. Shuya shrugged in response and crammed another cookie into his mouth. He continued chatting with Noriko and Yoshutiko for a while, but it was almost 10 o'clock when Shuya noticed something strange. Something weird was happening inside the bus. Yoshitoki, who was on his left, had suddenly fallen asleep and was softly breathing. Shinji Mimura's body was slouching into the aisle. Noriko Nanakawa was also asleep. No one seemed to be talking. Everyone seemed to be asleep. Well, yeah, anyone excessively health conscious might be going to bed now, but still, this was their long-awaited trip. Wasn't it a bit early to fall asleep right after leaving? Why doesn't everyone sing or something? Doesn't this bus have one of those atrocious machines Shuya hated? Karaoke. Worst of all, Shuya himself was overcome with drowsiness. He looked around in a daze. Then he couldn't even move his head, which felt heavy. He slouched against his seat. His eyes drifted through the narrow space to the rearview mirror at the center of the large windshield fading in the dark. He managed to make out the tiny image of the driver's upper body. The driver's face was covered with what appeared to be a mask. A hose-like tube extended downward from the mask. Thin straps were wrapped around his head, strapped above and below his ears. What was that? Except for the hose extending downwards, it resembled an airline emergency oxygen mask. So he can breathe inside this bus? Ladies and gentlemen, this bus will be making an emergency landing due to engine trouble. Like, please fasten your seatbelts, wear your oxygen masks, and follow crew members' instructions. Yeah, right. He heard a scratching sound on the right. Shuya had to struggle to catch a glimpse over there. His body felt so heavy. It was as if he were immersed in transparent jelly. Shogo Kawada was standing up and struggling to pry open a window. But whether it was jammed shut from rust or a broken lock, the window refused to budge. Shogo slammed his left fist against the glass. He's trying to break the glass. Why all the fuss? But the glass didn't break. The fist, ready to strike the glass, all of a sudden went limp and clumsily dropped. His body collapsed into the seat. Shuya thought he heard that low voice he'd only recently familiarized himself with faintly gasp. Damn. Almost immediately Shuya fell asleep too. At approximately the same time, students, families in Shirawaya were visited by men in black sedans. Alarmed by the late-night visit, the parents must have been shocked when the visitors presented them with documents stamped with the government's official peach insignia. In most cases, the parents would silently nod as they thought of their children, whom they most likely would never see again. But there were those who frantically protested, in which case they would be knocked out by an electroshock baton, or, in the worst case, be pummeled by fresh bullets spat out from a submachine gun, one step ahead of their children in departing from this world. By then, the bus assigned to Shiroiwa Junior High School's third year's Class B study trip had long since branched off from the rows of other buses and taken a U-turn towards the city of Takamatsu. After returning to the city, it wove its way through various roads before it finally stopped and quietly turned off its engine. The man in his 40s, whose hair was peppered gray, looked like a typical nice bus driver. Still wearing the oxygen mask that was digging into his slightly sagging chin, he turned towards the Class B students with a faint look of pity. But as soon as another man appeared under the window, his face stiffened. He gave the Republic's idiosyncratic salute. Then he pressed a switch to open the door. Shuya glanced outside as the masked men in battle gear came rushing in. Under the moonlight, the bluish-white concrete piers gleamed like bone. And beyond the pier, the ship that would transport the players was swaying sluggishly in the wide, open Black Sea. Let's see. We can do another chapter. That's fine. For a moment, Shuya thought he was in a familiar classroom. It wasn't the usual third year Class B classroom, of course, but there was a lectern, a worn out blackboard, and on the left, a tall stand with a large television. There were rows of desks and chairs made of plywood glued onto steel tubes. On Shuya's desk, someone had carved anti government graffiti into the corner with a pen. The dictator loves women in uniform. Then he noticed everyone at their desks, the boys clad in buttoned up school uniforms, and the girls in their sailor suit school uniforms. All 41 classmates would only moments ago, at least that's what it felt like, been riding the bus together. The only thing was either sprawled over on their desk or slouched back in their seats. They were all completely asleep. From beside the frosted window on the side of the hall, assuming this building had the same layout as a school, Shuya surveyed the rest of the room. He seemed to be the only one awake. In front of him, to his left and towards the middle of the room, was Yoshitiko's Kuninobu. Behind him was Naroki Nakagawa, and beyond Yoshitiko was Shinji Miyamura. They were all sprawled over their desks, sleeping deeply. Hiroki Sugimura surrendered his large body to his desk. That was when it finally dawned on Shuya that the seating assignment was identical to the one they had at Shiroiwa Junior High School. By the windows on the left side by the windows on the left side. That was also when he began to realize why the place felt odd. The windows beyond Hiroki's body appeared to be covered with some kind of black board. Steel sheets. They provided an icy reflection of the dull light from the rows of fluorescent lights hanging from the ceiling. The frosted glass windows on the side of the hall seemed to be draped in black. Maybe they were boarded up too. It was impossible to determine the time of day. Shuya looked at his wristwatch. It read 1 o'clock in the morning. In the afternoon, the date read Thursday 22nd. Which meant that, unless someone had tampered with his watch, either 3 or 15 hours had passed since he had had that strange attacks of drowsiness. Alright, let's assume that's the case. Still, Shuya looked at his classmates. Something felt off. Of course, the whole situation was strange, but there was something in particular that disturbed him. Shuya immediately realized what it was. Face down on her neck, Naroki had above her collar a silver metal band wrapped snugly around her neck. Because of his buttoned up collar, Yoshikito Kunobi's band was barely visible, but Shuya managed to see it. Shinji Mimura, Hiroki Sugimura, everyone had one on their necks. Then the thought occurred to Shuya. He reached for his own neck with his right hand. He felt something hard and cold. The same thing must have been wrapped around his neck. Shuya tugged at it a little, but the fit was so tight it refused to budge. The moment he became conscious of it, he felt like he was suffocating. Steel collars. Steel collars as if we were dogs. Damn. He fidgeted with it for a while with his fingers, but then gave up. He wondered instead, What happened to the study trip? Shuya noticed his sports bag sitting by his feet on the floor. Last night he'd casually tossed his clothes, towel, school field trip notebook, and a bourbon flask into it. Everyone else had their bags by their feet. Suddenly a loud noise erupted from the front entrance, and the door slid open. Shuya looked up. A man came in. He was stocky but well built. His legs were extremely short, as if they had served as mere appendages to his torso. He wore light beige slacks, a grey jacket, a red necktie, and black loafers. They all looked worn out. A peach-colored badge was pinned to the collar of his jacket, indicating his affiliation with the government. His cheeks were rosy. What stuck out most was the man's hairstyle. He wore it down to his shoulders like a woman in her prime. It reminded Shuya of the grainy Xeroxed tape cover of a shown base tape he'd bought on the black market. The man stood at the lectern and surveyed the classroom. His eyes stopped at Shuya, who was the only one awake, assuming this wasn't a dream. The two stared at each other for at least a full minute, but perhaps because the other students were waking up, with their nervous breathing gradually spreading through the entire classroom, the man looked away from Shuya. Their voices woke up other classmates from their deep slumber. Shuya looked at the rest of the classroom. As they woke up, their eyes remained out of focus. Everyone was clueless. His eyes met Yoshitiko's Kuninobu's as his friend turned back. Shuya pointed at his collar, tilting his neck slightly. Yoshitoku immediately touched his neck. He looked shocked. He shook his head left and right and turned to the lectern. Noroki Nakawa also looked at Shuya with a dazed look. Shuya could only shrug in response. As soon as everyone seemed awake, the man spoke up in a cheerful voice. "All right, everyone awake. I hope you all slept well." No one replied, even the class clowns. Yutaka Sato and Yuka Nakagawa, female student number 16, were speechless. Okay, I'm gonna stop there because my voice is killing me. Yeah, good book. I don't know when the next stream will be, whenever I feel like it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Enjoy your Tuesday, and see you guys next time. Bye bye.